that as Attorney General, these are people that she can try to change the outcomes for. And if we're going to have a legalization on the ballot, people are going to vote for it, we want to have an Attorney General that's going to implement the law as it was intended. And while this may be getting old and Dana's probably sick of hearing it, I'm going to say it anyways. I challenge you to go look at any of the other candidates that are running for any position and see if they have a big pot leaf on their website. Because Dana Nessel does, because she's committed to this cause, and any advisor is trying not to, but she did it anyway. So let me please introduce what I hope will be our next Attorney General, the real cannabis candidate, and the one who is going to lead us to the promised land. Dana Nessel.
Considering that if I have my way, I'll be putting Mike's marijuana criminal defense business out of business. So, which is my hope.
I'll applaud. Thank you.
So a little bit about myself and how I came to even decide to run for the office of Michigan Attorney General. So I've been an attorney for about 25 years now. And the first 11 years of that as a prosecutor, an assistant prosecutor for Wayne County. And is this on?
I don't know.
There, now can you hear it? All right. So, yeah, first, so for 11 years I was an assistant prosecutor at Wayne County. And I started off sort of in the regular trial division as many assistant prosecutors do, which meant you just sort of saw a litany of various different kinds of cases. And some of those cases, of course, were marijuana-related, possession with intent to deliver, or manufacturing cases, or, if they were misdemeanors, possession cases. And I really felt incredibly uncomfortable with prosecuting these cases. For one, during my youth and all through college and law school, and even after I became a prosecutor, I just knew so many people that used marijuana, illegally of course, but I didn't consider them to be terrorists or, gangsters or anything. I mean, these were just regular people that I knew, some of whom, by the way, worked at the prosecutor's office, which I thought was sort of the height of hypocrisy. I felt as though I wanted to be a prosecutor because I wanted to help people. I wanted to go after the bad guys. And to me, the people that were using marijuana were not the bad guys. And I was having a hard time identifying what harms marijuana was doing to the community at large. And so I made a decision to expressly attempt to go into different divisions where I would not have to prosecute marijuana offenses. And so I went into the sex crimes division and the child abuse division, various different divisions where I really could say, well, I think I'm really putting bad guys away. I was in the homicide division where, unfortunately, what I saw was this. I did see a lot of homicides and a lot of deaths as a result of marijuana. However, each and every one of those deaths came about as a result of gang warfare over marijuana. So it was all marijuana that was being peddled on the black market. And all I could think was, if only this product was legalized, we wouldn't see any of these murders. And we could eliminate so many homicides in the community in which I was working. So that made very little sense to me. But after 11 years, I went into private practice, and at that time I began to defend marijuana-related cases and civil asset forfeiture cases. And it was then, because obviously, when you're a prosecutor, you stand next to the defendant. There's a little trick you play as a prosecutor. You try never to identify a person by their name. You just say the defendant, because that dehumanizes them to the jury. But when you are representing someone, of course, you get to know them on a very personal level. And, what I saw time and time again were good people whose lives were being ruined as a result of the war on marijuana. And I saw so many people whose lives were in utter disarray because they were being prosecuted. But I really could identify very few people whose lives were better, The ways in which society was better off because we had these draconian laws criminalizing marijuana usage and manufacturing and so forth. And I think of so many different cases that I've had, but I think of this one case in particular always, because it was a junior at the University of Michigan in the engineering program. There was this kid who had a 4.0 average, and he was on full scholarship, and he was really on his way to great things. And then he had the misfortune to be walking down the street in Northville Township, and a cop smelled marijuana on him, and as you know, that is probable cause to seize a person, to search them, and he had a couple joints on him. Anyway, he ended up ultimately getting charged with possession, and he was in front of a certain judge in the 35th District Court who very, very anti-marijuana, and really threw the book at him and gave him really some of the most stringent conditions that I'd ever seen for probationary conditions, and they were so difficult to comply with that my client ultimately had to drop out of school, and he lost his scholarship, and he ended up violating, not because he was using again, but just because it was so hard for him to test as frequently as this judge wanted him to test. I'll never forget, as I'm standing next to this young kid who had such a promising future, and we're standing in front of the judge, and the judge is screaming and yelling at him and saying, see what happened here? Marijuana has ruined your life. And I said, Judge, it's not marijuana that ruined this guy's life. It's the criminal justice system that ruined his life. You're the one ruining his life. He was doing perfectly fine up until he landed in your courtroom. And it's just something that's really stuck with me as to the lives that have been ruined as a result of prosecution of a product that I'm sorry, I don't see it, and I've never been able to see it as any more harmful than, frankly, half the products that are in my medicine cabinet right now, and probably, frankly, much less harmful than some of them. So as time went on, I really grew to despise this abject failure in the war against marijuana that I've seen, and all of, as Mike mentioned, the hundreds of millions of dollars that I see wasted, absolutely wasted, in the testing and the investigation and the prosecution of marijuana-related offenses that could be spent in a way that was actually helping our state residents instead of harming them. I've seen that to be particularly the case since medical marijuana became legal in 2008, because in part I've grown to see really how useful it is as a form of medicine for so many people, but so many people in my life, people that I care about, And, for me personally, I have so many different family members who had conditions that paralyzed them, severe digestive disorders or rheumatoid arthritis or various other conditions where people could not really lead a normal life, some of which you couldn't take opioids to address those problems, or others where people had become addicted to the opioids, and it was now the opioids that was endangering their lives. And really the remarkable turnaround I saw in the lives of so many people when medical marijuana became legal, and how helpful that product has been to so many people. And I have to say, so I'm listening to the back and forth between Mike and Tara and some of the rest of you about what people have to go through in order just to transport legal marijuana from a manufacturing facility to a dispensary or from to a patient. And I'm horrified by it. And I have to say, these issues that you're talking about having to worry about what happens if you get pulled over, even though you have marijuana that is completely legal in your vehicle, and knowing that there's a good chance it is going to be seized and it's going to be forfeited, and then you're going to have to be trapped in the justice system for months, maybe years, trying to get it back. I have one word for it, and I'm sorry if it's inappropriate, but it's bullshit. It's bullshit is what it is. I mean, why is this treated as though it's child pornography, or as though you have a kidnapping victim in the trunk of your car? It's ridiculous. Do you think that when Pfizer or GlaxoSmithKline is delivering, a huge truckload of OxyContin, that they have to worry about that happening? The difference is their product is actually going to kill people. Yours is not. Right. And that's the truth of the matter. That is. So anyway, this past year, I've been thinking a lot about the office of Michigan Attorney General because I have seen how terrible Bill Schuette has been, not just on this issue, but on so many other issues that are meaningful to me and that I care about. And so for a long time, just sort of looking, who is going to be a good person to run for the office of Attorney General in this state? And asking lots of different people and making inquiries. And I talked to the chair of the Michigan Democratic Party, and I said, well, who do you guys have lined up here? Anybody good? And this was last summer, and he told me, well, yeah, we got somebody great. We got this Patrick Miles guy. And, he's an Obama appointee, and he went to Harvard, and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, Pat Miles, what the U.S. attorney from the Western District, that guy? And they said, yeah, isn't that great? And I said, no, that is so not great. That is the opposite of great, actually. Because I knew so many caregivers that he had prosecuted and put into prison, and patients, and I knew what his views were. And this was admitted to me by the party chair, that he remained adamantly opposed to legalization of marijuana, and he was still committed to the fact that he didn't subscribe to the MMA in the first place, and believed it to have been wrongfully passed and that it was dangerous. And I said, you know what, if that's who you guys have running, then, count me in. I'm running. I do not accept that he should be the nominee for my party, and I'm not okay with it. So I decided to run, and actually some of the first people that I called, frankly, I called Mike Komorn, who I've known now since I think I was in middle school. Mike was such a heartthrob to all the ladies in high school. I just have to tell you that it's true. I mean, he's got the gray beard thing happening now, but you should have seen him 30 years ago. Anyway.
But he's turning red.
And no, still very handsome. But so I told him I wanted to talk to him, and he was nice enough to come to my office with Jeff Frazier and Steve Miller, so that we could sit down and talk about, this issue and other issues and why I wanted to run. And I am just so grateful because right away they signed up to support my campaign at a time where I was clearly not the party favorite. If anything, I was really discouraged from running from many party insiders and told that I didn't have a shot at becoming the party nominee, and I might as well not even, attempt this effort. Fortunately, Mike got behind my campaign. He introduced me to Jamie Lowell, who, does Jamie look a little like Mr. Rogers to everybody? Is it just me? Am I crazy? A little bit. He's always got the cardigans on. And he's so mellow and relaxed, just as Mr. Rogers was. Mr. Rogers was a weed smoker, right? Am I wrong? Probably. Yeah. So, but they have been so tremendous, and I have to say, but not for their support, and not for the support of the cannabis community, there is no way that I really could have made this effort. It's funny, I went from being what was considered to be a real long shot for this nomination to being, by and large, the front runner at this point. And Merz and Donor and all the big political pundits are calling me the front runner. And I could not have done that had it not been for their support, because the number one thing that people look at when they're deciding whether they want to support you or not is this one word, they call it viability. And viability is a euphemism for, do you have financial backing? But not for all the hard work that Mike and Jamie and others did to try to put me in a position where I could be considered viable, I would not have even gotten a second look from so many people in the party, or the new people who have signed up to become members of the parties, some expressly because of this issue. And I am so proud to have garnered the endorsement of MI Legalize and the Cannabis Caucus of the Michigan Democratic Party and a lot of other organizations. But let me tell you a little bit about how I view the office of Attorney General as it pertains to marijuana issues. Firstly, I want to make certain that these laws are implemented fairly. Now, I'm very hopeful, of course, that the MI Legalize ballot proposal will pass in November. I have every confidence that it's going to make the ballot and that it will pass, and we know the numbers are incredibly high. I do foresee that by the time I'm sworn into office January 1st of 2019, marijuana will be fully legalized, at least under state law. And so what I want to do, what I want to make certain, I don't want a situation like you saw with Bill Schuette, where you have an AG who fundamentally despises a law that he is now charged with implementing and enforcing. And to me, the example I could give is, what if you had somebody who was the biggest pro-life advocate, and now you put them in charge of regulating Planned Parenthood? It would be like that, wouldn't it? Or for instance, when you had Scott Pruitt take over the EPA, or Betsy DeVos is now running the Department of Education. These are people who their life's work is to undermine the organizations that they're now running. And I never want to see that situation again. I want to see, with the legalization of marijuana, but even if it's not, and I know that it will, but even if we're just talking about medical marijuana, I want to make certain that you have a person in this incredibly important office that wants to see the fair enforcement of the law, and also, developing guidelines that are fair to everybody. And so the kinds of things that I want to make certain happen is that I don't ever want these situations that I'm reading about day in and day out, where people who, they're licensed as caregivers, they're licensed as patients. I don't want to see a situation where you have doors that are being kicked in and everybody's, assets are confiscated and the product is seized, and people end up spending years ensnarled in the system. I mean, that, if you're not seeing the doors of, breweries kicked in and bars raided and shut down, there's no reason you should be seeing that when marijuana is the product that is being sold either. There should literally be no difference between the way that we regulate alcohol and the way we regulate marijuana.
How do you change people's minds?
Well, that's a really good question. One of the things I want to do is this. One of the problems, quite frankly, is how we have trained law enforcement. So what I want to do is the same way you have. Now, when I was a prosecutor, one of the things that I handled were cases of police misconduct. So when you would have situations where the police had shot somebody, a civilian who was unarmed, or when you had an in-custody death that occurred, it was my job to go out to police departments and train them on the use of excessive force, or what the proper means were to keep somebody in custody to make certain that they were safe. Well, I think we need to do the same thing with marijuana. I really think that we need to have an arm of the Office of AG. And we see this because they go out and they do trainings on bullying and all kinds of other topics where there is training. And I think that you have to change the mindset of law enforcement so that they understand that marijuana is a product like any other legal product. In the same way that, you don't rough somebody up because they have their diabetes medication on them, you shouldn't be doing that because they have marijuana on them or in their vehicle. Or in a facility, or in their homes, or what have you. And I'm so horrified, when we talk about the smell test. I mean, this is the only product in the world where literally, if you smell like marijuana, there's pretty much nothing that law enforcement can't do to you. And that absolutely has to be changed, and it's something that I want to be a part of. Understanding, of course, that this will not be a legislative position, but I'll be able to guide the legislature in making certain that the laws are changed. And I'll be able to guide law enforcement to make certain that they understand that we have to change the way that we view marijuana. And not just, by the way, for law enforcement, but also for people who could be utilizing this product to help themselves. And I was talking to this older gentleman. Maybe he was in his 70s or 80s. I was up in Ontonagon, which is, does everybody know where that is even? It's in the Upper Peninsula. It's all the way on the west side of the state. It's so far west, I think it's in the central time zone. And, this fella, he had so many chronic pain conditions. And he had been prescribed, hydrocodone, and was taking that for a while, and had terrible, terrible side effects, horrible side effects, and had become addicted to it, and really felt as though he was close to death as a result of his addiction, and managed somehow to wean himself off it. And all he wanted to do was to be able to legally take medical marijuana. But first of all, there was no place that he could actually find it. And secondly, he was terrified. Here's a guy who spent his whole life, never been arrested, hardworking guy, and he was a respected member of the community, and he was terrified at the thought of what would happen to him if he got a legal prescription for marijuana, and what would happen to his life. And you know what? I understand it. He should be terrified in some communities, and I want to absolutely eradicate that issue. And I think that in retraining law enforcement and having someone from the Office of the AG come out and talk to people in law enforcement so that they don't view it the same way anymore is incredibly important. But you know what?